Almost the whole world knows Muammar Gaddafi as a cruel dictator. However, in this video, I will try to discuss how true this is. Was he really a dictator? Or was he a person who cared about his country and people? Hello, this is Fractustv, and today we will talk about Muammar Gaddafi. I will briefly try to tell you the history of his rise and fall. Subscribe to the channel and enjoy the video. After World War II, Libya was ceded to France and the United Kingdom, and both countries linked it administratively to their colonies in Algeria and Tunisia. Until 1969, the country was ruled by the Senius dynasty under the monarchy of King Idris, who kept Libya in total obscurantism. Oil was first discovered in Libya in 1959. People believed that the situation in the country would improve, but the income from oil went entirely to the budgets of foreign companies and ruling parties. Despite the huge oil income, the country still did not develop and did not change anything for the better. People were facing many problems such as health, education, lack of housing, and others. The literacy rates at the time were shockingly low, with only 250,000 out of 4 million inhabitants able to read and write. It was urgent to change the situation, and at this time, Muammar Gaddafi, who was kind to the young country, appeared as a savior. In 1969, the Senius dynasty was overthrown by a group of officers led by Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi, who declared true independence and expelled the dominant foreign forces from the country. One of Gaddafi's immediate policies was to share benefits and wealth with all Libyans. The son of an itinerant Bedouin farmer, Gaddafi was born in a tent in the Libyan desert. He proved a talented student and graduated from the University of Libya in 1963. He graduated from the Libyan Military Academy in 1965 and thereafter rose steadily through the ranks, all the while continuing to plan a coup with the help of his fellow army officers. After September 1st, 1969, when Gaddafi seized control of the government in a military coup, Gaddafi was named Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and Chairman of Libya's new governing body, the Revolutionary Command Council. Gaddafi immediately began to purge the country of foreign troops and removed the US and British military bases from Libya in 1970. He expelled most members of the native Italian and Jewish communities from Libya that same year. And in 1973, he nationalized all foreign-owned petroleum assets in the country. Since Gaddafi took power, oil has been the main resource in the hands of the leader of the newly proclaimed Libyan Arab Republic. The triumph of the 1969 revolution marked a paradigm shift, moving the new government to use its oil income to boost redistributive measures among the population, generating a new model of economic and social development for the country. Throughout Gaddafi's tenure, ambitious social programs were launched in the areas of education, health, housing, public works, and subsidies for electricity and basic foodstuffs. These policies led to a substantial improvement in the living conditions of Libyans, from being one of the poorest countries in Africa in 1969 to being the continent's leader in its Human Development Index in 2011. The United Nations Development Programme, 2010, considered Libya a high-development country in the Middle East and North Africa. This translated status meant a literacy rate of 88.4%, a life expectancy of 74.5 years, and gender equality, among several other positive indicators. During Gaddafi's rule, many things changed in Libya compared to before. There was no electricity bill. Electricity was free for all citizens during Gaddafi's reign. Interest on loans was non-existent, as banks in Libya were state-owned, and loans were provided to all citizens at 0% interest by law. Home ownership was considered a human right in Libya. All newlyweds in Libya received $60,000, dinar, $50,000 from the government to buy their first apartment, helping them start a family. Education and medical treatments were free in Libya. Before Gaddafi, only 25% of Libyans were literate. During his reign, the figure rose to 83%. If Libyans wanted to pursue a farming career, they received farmland, a farming house, equipment, seeds, and livestock to kickstart their farms, all for free. The price of petrol in Libya was 14 cents per litre during Gaddafi's time. Libya had no external debt, and its reserves amounted to $150 billion. A mother who gave birth to a child received US $5,000. 25% of Libyans had a university degree during Gaddafi's reign. Gaddafi carried out the world's largest irrigation project, known as the Great Man-Made River Project, to make water readily available throughout the desert country. If this is called dictatorship, I wonder what type of leadership Democrats have. Gaddafi believed that representative democracy as a model of government was inadequate, and he thus formed a Jamahiriya that Gaddafi claimed was a system of government and a supreme form of democracy, in which the people themselves were the president. In Jamahiriya, Gaddafi argued that the masses possessed more power than they could have under representative or Western democracy. The Libyan leader worked to strengthen ties with neighboring countries such as Egypt, Morocco, Syria, Tunisia, and Chad, among others, as well as maintaining close relations with countries like France and Russia. Gaddafi also connected with Latin American countries such as Venezuela and Cuba, which led him to cultivate an extensive network of contacts and uncomfortable influence on Europe and the US. Meanwhile, Gaddafi was becoming known for his erratic and unpredictable behavior on the international scene. His government financed a broad spectrum of groups worldwide that sought revolutionary objectives of their own, including the Black Panthers and the Nation of Islam in the United States and the Irish Republican Army in Northern Ireland. These activities brought him into growing conflict with the US government, and in April 1986, a force of British-based US warplanes bombed several sites in Libya. The UN imposed various sanctions on Libya. UN sanctions against Libya were subsequently lifted in 2003, and following Gaddafi's announcement that Libya would cease its unconventional weapons program, the United States dropped most of its sanctions as well. Although some observers remained critical, these measures provided an opportunity for the rehabilitation of Gaddafi's image abroad and facilitated his country's gradual return to the global community. In February 2009, Gaddafi was elected chairman of the African Union, and later that year, he gave his first speech before the UN General Assembly. The lengthy critical speech, in which he threw a copy of the UN Charter, generated a significant measure of controversy within the international community. In February 2011, after anti-government demonstrations forced Presidents Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali and Hosni Mubarak from power in the neighboring countries of Tunisia and Egypt, anti-Gaddafi demonstrations broke out in the Libyan city of Benghazi. As the protests spread throughout the country, the Gaddafi regime attempted to violently suppress them, directing police and mercenary forces to fire live ammunition at protesters and ordering attacks by artillery, fighter jets, and helicopter gunships against demonstration sites. Gaddafi's violent tactics also alienated senior figures in the Libyan government. The Libyan Minister of Justice resigned in protest, and several senior Libyan diplomats either resigned or issued statements of support for the uprising. On February 22nd, Gaddafi delivered a rambling, defiant speech on state television, refusing to step down and calling the demonstrators traitors and saboteurs. He urged his supporters to defend him by fighting protesters. As an initially peaceful protest movement transformed into a fully fledged armed uprising against his 42-year rule, Gaddafi pledged to chase down the cockroaches and rats who had taken up arms against him, inch by inch, room by room, home by home, alleyway by alleyway, person by person. But after a North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, military intervention, and 8 months of intense conflict, it was Muammar Gaddafi and his inner circle who found themselves cornered and isolated in the coastal city of Sirte, Gaddafi's hometown. As the opposition gained strength, international pressure for Gaddafi to step down increased. On February 26th, the UN Security Council unanimously approved a measure that included sanctions against the Gaddafi regime, imposing a travel ban and an arms embargo and freezing the Gaddafi family's assets. On February 28th, the United States announced that it had frozen $30 billion in Libyan assets linked to Gaddafi. Gaddafi's hold on power appeared increasingly weak as the opposition forces gained strength. By the end of February, opposition forces had established control over large amounts of Libyan territory, encircling Tripoli, where Gaddafi remained in control, but in growing isolation. On the morning of October 20th, 2011, Muammar Gaddafi, the son of Muammar Gaddafi, who had led the defense of Sirte, ordered Gaddafi's inner circle, his remaining loyalists, and some of the remaining civilians to abandon the besieged District 2 of Sirte. After traveling a few more hundred meters westward, the rest of the convoy came upon a Misrata-based militia, and was then struck by airburst bombs fired from a NATO warplane, which incinerated dozens of Gaddafi fighters. While some of the survivors of the NATO attack engaged in a skirmish with the Misrata militiamen, Muammar Gaddafi and other survivors from the convoy fled to a nearby walled villa compound, and soon thereafter tried to escape through the fields and 2 drainage pipes underneath a major road nearby. That is where the Misrata militias caught them. Muammar Gaddafi was immediately set upon by Misrata fighters, who wounded him with a bayonet in his buttocks, and then began pummeling him with kicks and blows. By the time Muammar Gaddafi was loaded into an ambulance and transported to Misrata, his body appeared lifeless. It remains unclear whether he died from this violence, the shrapnel wounds, or from being shot later, as some have claimed. Anti-Gaddafi forces captured alive an estimated 150 persons after the battle. They transported some 70 of these survivors to Misrata and held them there in custody, but at least 53, and possibly as many as 66 people were found dead the next day at the nearby Mahari Hotel. This report presents evidence that Misrata-based militias, after capturing and disarming members of the Gaddafi convoy and bringing them under their total control, subjected them to brutal beatings before apparently executing dozens of them. Libya's transitional authorities have taken no serious steps to investigate this grave crime, even though the evidence suggests that members of Misrata-based militias either perpetrated or have direct knowledge of this crime. By the time of his killing, Libya had the highest GDP per capita and life expectancy on the continent. Fewer people live below the poverty line than in the Netherlands. Although Gaddafi, the problem of Libya at that time, was killed, the situation did not improve after his death. Instead, it severely worsened. Libya is as much of a mess as ever, with fighting split among Arab nationalists, Islamists, regional militias, and more. In the end, judge for yourself whether Gaddafi was a problem for Libya. Let's compare the situation then and now, and everything will become clear. Thank you for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.